Good morning, everybody. It is Melissa here, and I am going to be speaking with the lovely Caroline Carrington of Jewel in the Lotus Coaching. I'm actually going to try to bring her on as well. We're going to be talking about the weaving of neo-Tantra and BDSM and her experience as a professional. And so we're going to bring her on right now. I'm like tapping around this queue. Okay.
Hi.
Yes, we did it.
We did. I think we're working out our technical difficulties. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with us.
Yes, wonderful. All right.
Great. So I'm going to take a moment just as people are jumping on. I just want to make sure that this is also streaming to my page. That's where I told my friends they would be. Welcome, Pradeep. So give me a second just to look at my page. All the technical things we have to learn these days as sex educators.
Yeah.
I
like your maroon or your burgundy background.
Thank you. Yes, those are the curtains in my home. I'm enjoying them too. So great. I'm just adding that to the timeline. So that works.
Okay, great.
Wonderful. Well, I'm really thrilled we're finally getting a chance to talk today because we've been planning this for a while.
I know. I've been doing these with pleasure segments and just interviewing various teachers and workshop facilitators and folks about a variety of topics. So I've been really interested in bringing you on for probably a few years now.
Yay! Well, it always ends up unfolding at the perfect time. And I want to invite our viewers to please type in the city that you are dialing in from. We're going to be present with each other during the call. And if you have any questions, you can pop those in. And I think Melissa's going to be tracking those, right?
Yes.
We're going to be trying to talk and track your questions at the same time. So, but please feel free to ask questions because this is the time. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that there is a real difference between abuse and BDSM or kink play. And I want to say that I am a big advocate for trauma survivors. I really support any victims of abuse or anything that's happened non-consensually to have a vehicle to come forward, to be supported. I do this both publicly and I do a lot of work behind the scenes. So we don't condone abuse or violence in any form through this video. And it just felt very relevant to start by speaking that. Welcome, Mark. Welcome, Vincent. So yeah, I know you were kind of introducing yourself, but people are still joining the call. So can you share with us a little bit about what you do in the world?
Yeah, so I'm based in Northern California and I have my own personal private practice here. I do a lot of somatic work. I do sex education. I do sexological body work. I also run a group called Sensuous Society, and we're actually having a beautiful, fun event this Saturday, which you can find all that information on my Facebook page. But essentially, yeah, I started off as a raw food chef, started doing clinical hypnotherapy, noticed that there was a really deep need for folks that were coming to me about all kinds of issues and exploration around sexuality. And I think it was just something that I naturally was just fascinated with. And so that kind of led me into this whole path. So, yeah.
I'm learning things about you. I didn't know you were a raw food chef.
Yeah, I had a restaurant. I had a restaurant and a catering company, and I've written a few books, and I lived, as a strict raw foodist for a while. So I used to help people actually transitioning their diet and getting into the psychology of what would be their blocks. And that's what actually led me to clinical hypnotherapy first. And then I started getting all these clients that had, well, if you can help me feel better about myself and eat better, what about sex? And I was like, yes, there's a connection there.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
Well, how exciting. I mean, there are lots of ways that we can support ourselves to more health and feeling better in general. So I love it. I love it that I'm learning more about you today. I moved because the lighting was so horrible on, yeah. So I'm trying to get the camera correct. Anyway, so I want to share a little bit about myself and my own journey. I started exploring, welcome Zoe, welcome Tanya. I started exploring kink or BDSM, and we'll go into defining that in a moment, about 13, it might even be 14 years ago now. So quite a while ago. And I'm a trauma survivor. So I didn't, when I was first introduced to it, people did things like pinch my nipples and they try to use a paddle on me. And that honestly just reminded me of being hit as a child. And it was not erotic and it was not fun. And I just thought it wasn't my thing. And actually, when I came to the US, I met somebody who, you know, there are lots of ways to play. There isn't really one way to play in BDSM. And so I explored some different kinds of things. And I was like, oh, well, these sensations, these are quite interesting. And yeah, what I started learning was that there are different kinds of pain, right?
Yeah.
Or sensation.
Sensation, yeah,
And
definitely.
yeah. So I started off, you know, just a regular person exploring and terrified to go to the dungeon. And then I realized, like, normal people, believe it or not, normal people go and hang out at a dungeon. And it was only actually after that that I discovered Tantra. And I remember when I did an interview with Laurie Handlers. Do you know Laurie?
I do not.
Anyway, you can look up Laurie Handlers. She does quite a lot of interviews with people,
Okay.
and she was saying it's an unusual way around. Most people normally discover, I should say, neo-Tantra, which is this Western version of exploring sacred sexuality and turning our sexual life into something sacred and inviting, literally even inviting God into the bedroom. But most people do that first, and then as they start exploring their sexuality more, give themselves permission to try things, say like kink. And mine was the other way around. So I'm now a certified neo-Tantra educator, a pleasure expert. I run retreats and classes all around the world. I'm focused in the San Francisco Bay Area and Oakland, and I'm really passionate about getting people out of their heads and into their bodies. And I'm also a fan of very dynamic meditation because most of us aren't hanging out in caves in the Himalayas anymore.
Right.
And while that's awesome, like, you know, we don't all have time to just bliss out in meditation all day. So the more we can integrate and have meditation be part of our everyday practices, including things we might already be doing, like kink. I'm a big fan of that. I want to get the most juice and the most out of each practice that I engage. I'm a busy lady.
So Caroline, what were some, if you don't mind sharing, and it's up to you, but what were some of the specific kink things that really lit you up?
Well, a wonderful one to talk about is rope bondage, for example. And it could be, yeah, it doesn't always have to be bondage, but I really love rope because it translates so much energy. And you'll hear people talking about this term energy a lot in the neo-Tantra world. So if we're talking about, let me get more specific and talk about Kundalini Shakti, so this life force energy that's moving through all of us. And if we look at intimacy and connection and how those intersect, rope can become a beautiful way to become an extension of the giver's feeling, of the mood they want to invite you into as you explore. And I noticed for me, like I felt very held and very safe, even when I was
Yeah.
totally bound, which, right, doesn't
It's
always
like,
make
what?
sense with the mind.
Yeah, it's really beautiful to watch too. Some of my favorite rope artists are, it's almost like a meditation watching them. It's like a dance, literally,
Right.
between, it doesn't have to be fast, it can. And it doesn't have to be like hanging from the ceiling, though it can. But just this beautiful like meditation, this energy that's happening between however many people. It's really, really beautiful. Yeah.
Right. So it can be artistic. And just like you say, it can be this dance. One of my friends, Midori, she actually teaches
Mm,
something called rope dance, where it's not about bondage, but it is about feeling. It's hard for me to sit still,
she's so
but
awesome.
feeling the energy. Yes, she is. Feeling the energy between yourself and your partner and just using the rope as a vehicle for that. I'm going to give a shout out to
Wow.
her rope dojo, which I did,
Yeah.
I don't know, many years ago, where you could go and learn about this rope dance. But you know how athletes talk about that flow state when they're just in
Hmm.
the zone or in the flow, and artists
Hmm.
get it. I mean, lots of people know about flow states. Well, that's very similar
Yeah.
in my experience to what you're describing.
Yeah. It just shifts brain waves. Yep.
Absolutely. But I do feel like we might be getting a little ahead of some of our viewers
Yeah.
because we haven't defined any of these terms. So I'm
Yeah.
curious how you would define neo-tantra. What is that for you?
Well, I'm curious how you would define it because I am, I mean, I took one class from Barbara
Uh-huh.
and it was just to have more awareness around it. I don't identify as someone that practices Tantra per se. I'm not a Tantra practitioner. I took the class, but I mean, I guess I have my own practice and awareness around energy and chemistry and mindfulness and all of that. And so I think you would be better suited because you do have a background in this study
Mhm.
at defining what that is.
Okay, great. So I love that you were just referencing Barbara Carellis, who's been a teacher for both of us. We love you, Barbara. Barbara
Yeah.
has an amazing book out if you want to geek out on literally on this subject on neo-tantra and BDSM. And also she gives a lot of pranayama or breath techniques um,
Mm-hmm.
that, and she doesn't use weird Sanskrit words like I do. She speaks in very plain English, but her book is Urban
Right.
Tantra. And
Yeah.
I invite you to go and check it out because there are lots of practices you can do either with a partner or on your own, um, even just from the book. She's out of New York. So talking about Tantra is a really big subject, and we're not going to be able to cover all of it in this call. I use this analogy because I'm thinking of Tantra as a broad brushstroke, a practice that came from India through Hinduism and Buddhism. But what we're talking about in this call, I'm not a classical tantrika, or I'm not qualified to teach classical tantra. We're talking about neo-tantra, this focus on sacred sexuality as a meditation practice to get you more deeply connected with yourself, your partner, and for me, also the divine.
Mm.
So it's a great way to weave intimacy and connection. It's a great way to come home to your body. It's a very body-based practice. And I love it because it welcomes all of you. In a lot of the spiritual practices, and for me, Neo Tantra is that, but in a lot of practices, you're trying to overcome, you're trying to get over the fact that you're a human being and like you have, you have genitals and you have sexual desire. And I totally celebrate people that take a path of renunciation if that works for you. But I tried really hard and
I
it didn't.
it reminds me of a quote, if you're too heavenly minded, you're no earthly good. Um,
Mm.
and I don't mean that as a negative thing, but sometimes I meet clients that are just really focused on wanting to be the person on the mountain, but they live in, in this life, in this time right here, right now. And so they don't, I'm like, if you want that life, go do that. but it's not really what we're doing here, you know, now where you're living with your family with, you know, so it's different. It's different.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I also feel like we've, depending on your belief system, but we've chosen to incarnate, to come into these bodies, to live in this three-dimensional world. And let's see how
Yeah.
present we can actually be there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one of the things I love about kink, because, and I'm going to use the words kink and BDSM interchangeably. I almost always do, but as you referenced earlier, kink can be a meditation, and often with what's happening, if there's sensation play, for example, let's say you're being spanked. That was something that's actually pretty mainstream in many ways.
Yeah.
And I'm not, but if you are, I'm having all these lovely memories jumping in. Anyway, if you're being spanked,
I'm liking the sound that you're making with your hands, Caroline.
So Tanya, we'll get to your question in a moment. But you have to be exquisitely present with what's happening. It draws you so potently into the now. And as Westerners, most of us haven't grown up studying meditation, right? The sitting still, I mean, Vipassana, where you do 10-day silent retreat, is a wonderful practice, but it's quite hard for Westerners to just sit there and breathe and quieten the mind. So having this rhythmic sound, right, can help you drop in, as well as having the chemicals and the sensations on your skin inviting you to be exquisitely present.
Yeah, I found that it's a really beautiful tool for women who kind of leave their bodies, either in sex and intimacy, even just spending time with other people. Maybe they've had trauma or something, but just it really brings them into the moment. It's beautiful.
So before we go on, we haven't defined what BDSM is.
Yeah.
And I feel like I want to make sure we even though we're having fun chatting, that we're going about this in a way that people can follow, and we don't get too caught up in jargon.
Do you want to talk about the difference between BDSM and abuse? Do you feel like you need to touch down that first?
I'm going to define it first, and then we'll. I'm happy to go down that route. So the letters BDSM. What I'm going to say now, like, is it might be intense, so take a breath. It stands for
put my seatbelt on.
Bondage, domination, sadism, and masochism, right? And whenever I hear that version, I'm like, oh my goodness, that sounds like really kind of freaky. There are things even in that title that I'm not often comfortable with. Masochism, for example, is somebody who like really gets off on pain. That's not me.
On feeling it, right?
Well, it's not that I don't enjoy any kinds of intense sensation that sometimes can feel painful, but there are some people that I would call pretty hardcore masochists, and they just love it. Like they could be giggling as somebody is really hurting them, and they want to go for the most intense experience. That isn't me. Sometimes a spanking even could be too much or too painful.
Right.
So yeah, so that's sort of the classic definition. And then I want to go to Midori's definition, and I am going to read it off the computer screen, because this is the best definition on BDSM that I have ever heard. And I'm using kink and BDSM as the same thing, because sometimes the word BDSM can just be a little too jarring for people, or they don't resonate with it. And even the definitions we're giving here, it might not be your experience. Your experience may vary. So you get to decide what is true for you, as long as it's consensual. Safe, sane, and consensual is how I like to play. So Midori, or Auntie Midori, as she is affectionately called, she says, BDSM is childhood joyous play with adult sexual privilege and cool toys.
Nice.
Right. And this is one of the things for me. I tend to be really serious most of the time, but around sexuality, that is a playground for me.
Mhm.
I have plenty of other trauma about lots of other things, but I'm blessed that I'm not a sexual trauma survivor. So for me, sexuality and part of my sexuality includes exploring different kinks or different fetishes. That's part of me getting to connect with my really playful side.
Yeah,
So I just wanted
wonderful.
to, yeah, define that first. Midori, I reference her a lot when I talk about BDSM because she is one of the leading experts in the world and the person I hear talk the most intelligently on this subject. She's really geeked out on a lot of the terminology and gets underneath the jargon. So if you're wanting to learn more, I
Yeah. What's
strongly
her
recommend.
website that we can share?
I think it's planetmidori.com, but I
Okay.
want to stay present with
Yeah,
the video.
she's amazing. Okay.
Yes, happy to give her a shout out.
Yeah.
So you were asking about the difference then between abuse and BDSM.
And
So
I mean, I feel like I know the difference, but I would love to hear your take on that because that's
okay,
something I get asked a lot as well. Yeah.
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 So we started this video saying that, we're not wanting to take away at all from people's experience of abuse or people's experience of trauma. I take that very seriously. And I
Mhm.
also want to say, if this practice isn't for you, that's okay. There's no requirement to do this. It doesn't make you any more enlightened or less enlightened if you do or you don't. But
Right.
part of being sex positive for me is about embracing uh, people having a range of different ways they like to express and explore their sexuality.
Right.
Um, I'm I'm not probably going to give the most clinical definition of abuse right now, but abuse to me is something that is non-consensual, that is happening against your will, that is causing you harm, be it physical, sexual, spiritual, emotional. There's really a verbal abuse. There's really a
Hmm.
broad range. And I could imagine that people could go without understanding what kink is and go and see some of the activities that happen and go, oh my goodness, that's awful. That's abuse. If it doesn't work
Yeah.
for you, that's really fine. Honor your own boundaries. But for some people, it can end up actually being a very healing practice and an empowering practice.
Hmm.
It felt like you wanted to say something.
Oh, it's so funny. I get excited and I don't want to interrupt you, but I have to work on just listening and then remembering what. But as far as like healing, or there's two things. The first one is I've met people that identify as, a top or like a dom or like I'm a kink, expert, and they're abusive. They're not
Mhm.
actually educated and they are using it, I think, in a not a healthy way. So we have a lot of people like that just out in the world. Okay. And as far as using it as a healing practice, I had a teacher that I was working with and co-facilitating and doing fun things with. And I was spanked as a child. And so that
Yeah.
brings up all kinds of things with me. And it was beautiful that I could sit with them and say, this is making me nervous. And they held the space for me. And then I got to decide, is it going to be a hand? How hard is it going to be? Is it going to be a nice rhythm? And when I was able to make that choice and enjoy the sensation, I thought, wow, okay, this actually is kind of rewriting it for me. Because as a child, I didn't have the choice. I got punished. It wasn't enjoyable. And it was a mess. But as an adult, I could play with that and have it be really healing. And so I could be with someone and have the response in my body, but it melted away because this person was so present and really listened to me and not tried to push me over my edge. So
Yeah. I love that share. So thank you, because
Yeah,
we have the opportunity in these practices to repair and to take our power back. So often that was taken away from us. Now, I want to be clear, I don't think BDSM is a replacement for therapy. I do see people hanging out in the dungeon that are having like really big cathartic experiences. This makes it sound like I hang out at the dungeon every weekend.
yeah. It
I
sounds like it.
no, I don't. I'm actually these days. I'm instead of saying picky, I'm going to say I'm a connoisseur. So I tend to play in private normally, um, with play partners. But yeah, if you're going there and it's either amplifying something, like I can literally remember the last time I was paddled. It was 13 years ago. I burst into tears right away, and I have a very hard limit. It just reminded me of my childhood, and there was nothing erotic about it. Like it wasn't fun. It wasn't sexy. There was, you know. So one of the things I love as well, and I've used this, you know, in my Tantra work, I've used this in so many different avenues, is the negotiation that happens or that should happen. If you're going to have a successful experience, you need to have a
Yeah.
negotiation to talk about some kinds of things that you'd like to engage with this other person, things you definitely don't want to engage that are hard limits, right? Setting up a safe word, for example. Safe word can be, some people use like the traffic light colors, like red for stop and green for go. But you could use safe word, or I heard somebody in the dungeon once saying lawyer is their safe word. When I say lawyer,
That'll make anyone stop, right?
well, stop, you know, you can go stop, stop. Right. So some people do enjoy playing with that dynamic. So having a word in place where people know exactly what is being communicated is very helpful.
No, I meant when you hear the lawyer, then that makes you stop.
Right. That would get somebody's attention. And often in public play spaces, and I really encourage those of you that are wanting to try this for the first time, do it in public, like maybe go to a class with somebody or go to a public dungeon space, especially even if you are experienced and you're playing with somebody new. Because there's a dungeon monitor normally in place, normally a few watching. And if they see something untoward happening, right, they can come in and support you. If they hear you safe wording, they can come in and see if you need anything or see if you need support in getting the place stopped. So I reference the play needs to be safe, which means the person using the toys or the rope, I wouldn't let anybody tie me up, no matter how much, and I really like rope, but I wouldn't let just anybody do it, because you could get nerve damage, right? In I'm not that good at anatomy, but you could get nerve damage here or in your hands. I've actually had nerve damage from somebody. And so if somebody doesn't listen when you're like, my hands are getting numb, that's not.
Or you don't feel comfortable speaking up because you think, oh yeah, I need to like tough through this, you know, I need to like finish the scene or the experience, you know. And that's why I think calling on teachers are really, really important in this, instead of watching like a video or a movie or something.
Right. Well, there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
50 Shades of Grey is, if you want a great example, 50 Shades of Grey is abuse. It is non-consensual. There is no negotiation. And BDSM is something really different. And we haven't talked too much about how it can be sacred, but one of the ways it can be sacred is when, let's imagine you playing with somebody being in the dominant role and somebody being in the submissive role. When the dominant is actually in service to the needs of the submissive. And the submissive is offering, could be sexual service, could be positions they've agreed on, could be, you know, rubbing their feet, whatever, but they are in service to the dominant. And now you have this beautiful infinity loop where they're really taking care of each other. And it kind of looks like somebody's in control. Both of you are ultimately in control. And I feel I tend to play in the submissive role. I feel incredibly empowered when I play
Yes.
there.
Do.
So
I mean,
yeah, carry on.
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I want to jump back to something you said a little while ago because it is important. And as we're seeing in the age of Me Too, and I'm really grateful people are speaking out, there's the potential for abuse in every industry. We've seen it in USA gymnastics. We've seen it in politics. We've seen it like across the board in Hollywood, right? And abusive behavior should be called out. It shouldn't be tolerated and it shouldn't be allowed. So if you know of a community member that isn't keeping people safe, or that is, violating people's consent, speak up about it. I know there's been a lot of talk actually in the rope community. I'm so glad you're enjoying the conversation, Ona Ray. But
Yeah.
but it is important to actually speak out against these people to help other people stay safe. And I'm not talking about a witch hunt, but I think there's one of the potent things about this time we're living in is the truth telling that's happening.
Right.
And for me,
The
that's quite,
transparency.
absolutely, for me, that's quite tantric again. For me, that is Shakti, or this really powerful life force. That's the Shakti rising up, refusing not to be heard, right? The voice is loud. And for those of you that understand the Hindu iconography, like it's Kali, like, she's ferocious. Her rage will no longer be ignored. And that's a very powerful thing. So
Yes.
in any industry, I recommend that you vet people, that you get references. That's just the smart thing to do. You wouldn't let somebody look after your kid if you didn't interview them first and probably even do a background check, right? So be smart as well. And I want to give an example. 13 years ago, when I first started playing, I was so excited. And a friend of
I've
mine
got
was,
someone making a lot of noise outside my door. I'm going to
okay.
shut it.
Thank you.
Keep going.
Great. I'm going to keep going with my story. So I got invited to play by this guy that I'd met very briefly at a contact improv class, and he invited me to do kink play. And a friend of mine was in a very committed, serious DS, actually an MS, so a master and slave relationship with him. And I made the assumption, and I want to stress, this was a bad assumption and an incorrect assumption. I went, oh, well, my friend, let's call her Lisa, my friend Lisa is, she's great, and I know and trust her, so he must be okay. And he was a douchebag. He was really awful. He shamed me terribly. It was a really awful experience. So, while I don't want to scare people, I do want to say, like, do your own research, vet the person yourself. If something feels off, it might be, and it's okay to say that, like,
Right.
and that's actually why one of my rules is when I play with somebody for the first time now, I only play with them in public. And if they're not willing to do that with me, that's a very telling sign. So that could be one of.
I like that. I hadn't thought of that before. I guess, yeah, that's great. I like that.
And publicly, not everybody has access to a dungeon, for example, but there are many classes. Like, I want to just reference the two Naughty Boys. That's KNOTTY. JD et al. Are awesome. They're great guys. And they teach very easy to access classes on rope that are super fun. I remember going to one of them on a date. And it's a way where, again, you can explore very easy ties that you can go and practice at home afterwards, but in a safe environment.
Beautiful.
And I was coaching a student recently who's newer to kink, and he was like, oh, I want to explore and I want to play, but I run events that are a fusion of sacred kink and neo-Tantra. I'm not going to out them, but they're actually on the video with us right now. And anyway, so I run these events called Black Diamond Ritual, and we explore this fusion of neo-Tantra and BDSM. And so he was so interested, and yeah, he wanted to explore more, but he said, well, Caroline, in your rituals, there the space is held, but it's a little scary to try this out on a regular date with somebody else. So you can even use people's classes as a great tool to hold the safety of the container for the exploration.
Beautiful. Do you want to start going into how you weave these worlds together? I've only been to a different class of yours. I haven't been to one of your Black Diamond events. Do you want to, start going into that?
Sure, I'm happy to share that.
Okay.
So one of the things I love, and this actually comes from classical tantra, or this is my own spin on classical tantra, but I believe that even the seemingly profane is sacred. Now, I'm not an Agori, but the Agoris are a sect of pretty hardcore tantrikas in India, and they go and hang out in the graveyards, and they eat meat, and they drink, and they smoke hashish, and I believe they even do practices like engaging with blood and feces, and I don't want to gross too many people out, but I'm
really, wow,
really, and these
are that in history class.
Right, we don't get taught this stuff, but so these are classical tantrikas practicing in India. And yeah, Tanya Diamond just mentioned, I didn't want to out her, but she's saying she's close to an Agori lineage. So there are some very intense practices that are not all just about love and light. Sometimes we can get confused in the spiritual communities that it's just that. So my understanding, and I'm not an Agori, but my understanding is they're trying to take these intense practices and go, it's okay. It's okay to engage with this. We can still find God here. If God's a triggering word, you use the divine. And for me, that's where the conversation between neo-Tantra and Kink weaves in so beautifully. Because let's say, for example, we're playing with power exchange, and we're going to do it in a very subtle way. Welcome, Marianne. So let's imagine, I'm starting to go into my happy place, even imagining it.
You just say, let's imagine, and I'm already there. Okay.
Right. But so imagining that you're kneeling before somebody you adore. And for those of you that are tuning in at home, I actually invite you to go and practice this sometime. And then gaze up into their eyes. So eye gazing with adoring intent. And the person standing gets to feel the power, and you're not even touching. Oh, I'm getting turned on just talking about this. Yeah. So one person has chosen to assume a more submissive position and is gazing up at the person who is taking the more dominant posture. And just sitting in what I call both the exquisite and excruciating place of desire, and pausing there to be in the richness of that. So I'm trying to give you we're getting you so excited. I love it.
My phone just got really excited and fell off.
It did. So, you know, for some of you, this might just be words on a screen, but I recommend finding a friend or somebody you trust. Hopefully you trust your friends. Anyway, or, you know, coming to one of these classes, and this is one of the things we play with in my Black Diamond ritual. And I'll let you guys in on the, I'm going to call it the mind fuck, because we talk a lot about that in Kink. Anyway, so regardless of people's power dynamics, we switch, we make it both ways. So it's really interesting if somebody is very attached to being in the dominant role, and then they have to kneel before they're submissive. So it's really interesting to notice what happens, and it's quite profound. And I was inspired by this, if I have to pick one of the most erotic memories, and bear in mind I play in erotic spaces every day in my work world, and I teach it, and I talk to people about sacred sexuality all day. But one of my most erotic memories was kneeling naked across the room from my partner, and it was just him and I in the room, and he sat on the couch and he just watched me. And I mean, I easily knelt for an hour, and getting activated just talking about it. But really, I invite, some people are saying they still don't understand about power dynamics. Some of these things you actually have to try. And I think that's why there's a lot of misunderstanding about BDSM, because people can look at it from the outside and go, that's weird. Why are they hitting each other?
So it looks like we have a question from Tanya. I'm confused.
Yeah, I'm addressing that. Yeah, I'm addressing that.
Why is this? Why I'm confused about why this is power exchange. Go ahead.
Yeah, so power exchange does not have to be present in BDSM. I really like the power dynamics. I'm in control, and as people can tell from this.
Yeah, it's like the feeling the, why am I totally blanking on this? Wow. Feeling the difference, the masculine, feminine, or the polarity. It's
polarity.
Polarity.
I prefer polarity.
I feel, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So yes, there's polarity, and I think we can create polarity in many ways. But if you don't want to do power exchange, more power to you. There's some people that like the words top and bottom. And if you're topping and bottoming, there isn't really a power exchange at all. And the bottom can be saying, yeah, I mean, spank me harder. Come on, that's not enough, for example, or, take it easy. And you wouldn't really say that as a submissive, because there's a different dynamic at play. So what I love about this is the self-inquiry that it invites us into, and getting to know ourselves and being able to articulate what it is we want and also what we don't want.
Right.
I was told something.
So much trust.
It does involve a lot of trust, but then so does sex. So does, I have do I want to bring him into this? I've gone there, but, I have an 11-year-old son, and he's becoming more independent, and I'm having to trust him. And that's really hard for me. So, you may not want to find the edgiest practice to start with the first time. Maybe you try a blindfold. That comes under sensory deprivation.
So fun.
I know. Yeah. So sensory deprivation sounds. What's that?
I said that's such a simple and beautiful tool to start with.
Absolutely. And then just notice how your senses come online in a whole new way when one of them is taken away. So notice again how we're mapping back to neo-Tantra, because for me, when I'm exploring with my private students, I call it full body awakening. Like we're trying to enliven the physical, the energetic, and the emotional body, and bring as much aliveness and a blindfold can do that. Moving Kundalini energy through the nadis can do that. The first time I thought about breathing consciously, even though I teach it now, but was in a kink dynamic, and the person, he did something very simple. He just, in the middle of a scene, and a scene is like a negotiated time to play, where you have a few different elements that you might include and some you might exclude, but it has a beginning and an end time when you enter into a negotiated dynamic. So in the scene, he put his hand on my back, And I remember him syncing his breathing up with me. So he was inhaling and exhaling. And I'd never noticed anybody doing that before. I remember thinking he was so amazing. He would think to breathe with me. And now, many years later, I mean, I teach that a lot because, you know, from a neo-tantric perspective, that's going to bring us energetically into harmony. It helps our chakras or our energy centers to align.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of to if you think of it like a car or something, to be revving at the same frequency.
Mm-hmm.
But from a trauma perspective, that's actually co-regulation.
Yep.
Right? And co-regulation,
Yep.
it can help our nervous systems to calm down. And that's just
Mm-hmm.
using the breath. So I'll pause there because I want to make sure you can get a word in edgewise. But
I know it's beautiful. I'm just going to scroll. There was a question up here. So in BDSM, there are people who don't use dominant and submissive roles. It's a question. And then Max Cameron from Seattle says, absolutely. For some, it's only about sensation, not power. Yep.
right. So that's some of what I was referencing about the top and the bottom. So some people might just, I keep going back to rope because that's not only a kink for me, it's a fetish. I get turned on even confessing lots of
Yeah.
things
So
on this video, but even by like the smell of the rope or like the vibration when one one bit of rope
yeah.
moves between the other.
You know, I was going through the store. I was in Austin working with clients, and I had a couple come to me that wanted to practice. Now, I'm not a, you know, I learn from another teacher, so there's only a certain way that I can take people, right? So they wanted to learn, like, what are some ideas that we can start practicing this? They didn't really want to go to a party. They didn't know what to do at home. So they came into my studio, and I went into Home Depot and I got some silky rope. I mean, you can use hemp, you can use all these different textures, but I got this really slippery, yummy rope. Ties differently, but it's still yummy. And then I look over and I see some zip ties, and I was like, these look fun. And I really like them because of the sound. Like, I am all about the auditory. So, I mean, when I hear about the rope, or like when I use a
Yeah,
little single tail, it's more about the auditory for me that just like gets me so excited.
I love hearing that. I noticed when I was playing, it's really hard to get all these lovely flashbacks of experiences and still stay focused on our
I know.
conversation. And Marianne, I'm coming to your question. But when people snap a glove, even if it's that can be, even that can just get people pretty turned on. So some things are by association, or maybe it's a protocol or a practice you have in place that can that can start the juices flowing. And
Yeah.
I had a partner for a few years who uh, he kind of made his job really easy because he would be like talking to me through all the foreplay. And most of his foreplay was actually all the things he would tell me he wanted to do to or with me. But so by the time he got to really touching me, I was so ready to go. So right, so the mind can be this beautiful tool that we engage, be it with the snapping of a glove or the ripping open of a bag of something, or yeah,
Yep. The
many
Pavlov's
examples.
law of like, ooh, I know what's coming. I hear the zipper open, you know?
Right, exactly. So I want to just go back to Marianne's question, and I really like this because sometimes we can get a bit confused as experts. We think we've explained something and it hasn't always translated out. So Marianne, for me, the difference between dominance and submission, which does include a power exchange, one person is handing over for a period of time their power. And when I say that, I want to qualify, like, one of the most important things I was told early on was whatever happens as a submissive, do not lose your voice. So I actually coach people on that all the time, saying, like, Say yes, say no, say that doesn't work for me, say, and that doesn't make you a bad submissive. I want to be really clear. Having your voice is very potent and powerful. And if somebody tells you that you're not submissive enough, and somebody tried to tell me that, that means they're not dominant enough. And you need to find somebody else who knows how to be with all of who you are.
Yes, that's so
Yes.
unsafe. Yeah.
Right. You know, for example, if somebody handcuffs you, I'm trying to pick some examples that some of the viewers might have even experimented with. You can normally find handcuffs, you know, at your local gimmick store or at your local sex shop. And if somebody has the key, they are, in some ways, they're in charge now, right? So they are taking the power position, and you are choosing to hand that over, right? Because remember, we're advocating for consensual. I'm glad you liked my comment about them not being dominant enough. Thank you, Max. But when I'm referring to topping and bottoming, the reason I don't feel like there's a power exchange, and people may have totally different definitions. These are my understandings. So please go and do your own research. There's a really great book by Jay Wiseman called SM 101. And it was the first book I read, and it'll go through it'll give you the basics, really. It's a great starting point for a lot of people. And Midori also has wonderful books on rope bondage too. But when I actually don't enjoy playing top and bottom, only because I so want the power exchange, but some people don't. So honor that. So for example, let's imagine that I would like to be flogged, say, on my heart. Let's involve some neo-Tantra here. I'd like to be flogged on my heart chakra, so on my heart center, with a beautiful, sensual flogger. All right. There's not actually pain involved. There's some sensation, but it brings blood to the surface of the skin. Yeah, it can be really there can be nothing painful about it, right? Because they a whole range of different floggers. And I could go up to the person and say, "Hi, I want to be flogged. Do you have some skill in that? Have you learned? Can I check your flogger?" And then we negotiate whatever the boundaries are. And then I'm like, "Yes, I'd like you to flog me for half an hour on my heart." That might be a lot, actually. Flog me for 5 minutes on my heart. Yeah, that'd be a lot. And then I want to breathe and notice what's happened and the heart opening. And okay, I need you to stop for a minute because I need to cry. Because if we're opening up the heart chakra, then there can potentially be emotion that needs to be expressed. Or maybe I'm angry, so emotion gets released. And then I'll say, I know we agreed to play for a full half hour, but I'm feeling complete, and I'd like you to come and stand behind me and hold me. So I'm being the bottom in that scenario, right? And the top is the person doing the things that I'm asking them to do. But we are total equals. There's no exchange of power. I haven't handed anything over. I'm asking for what I want. I'm often guiding the process. It's like to me, it often seems like there's more talking in the topping and bottoming, during the scene dynamic, because it's more like, let's co-create this experience together, and I'm going to tell you what I want. And frequently in power exchange, you're going, I'm going to negotiate first before the power exchange is engaged. But once that's engaged, I'm handing my power over to you, and I'm going to submit to your wishes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and then speak up if something needs to be changed, or I'm no longer enjoying it, or whatever. Yeah.
Right. So thank you for your question, Crystal, and we'll get there in a moment. So I want to geek out on this for some of the more advanced people that might be dialing in, because I've already seen some of them. And so, for example, one of my kinks is to be pleasing. And that stems from a wounding in my childhood where I was trying to be good enough, right? And yes, I'm doing my inner child work in therapy, and I'm doing it in all those places too. But there's a way where in a kink scenario, I can set myself up for success and be perfect, right? In that scenario. And so I can reinforce this experience of, yeah, I'm enough, I'm a good girl, I've done it perfectly, and I can get acknowledgement for that. And one of my love languages is words of appreciation. So, yeah, so being pleasing is like really validating for me. But where things start getting a little confusing in the area of pain, and let's take a spanking, for example. So I dated somebody who used to tie for a website called kink.com. And kink.com is, as you might know from the title, it's a pretty hardcore. If you've never explored kink before, that is probably not the place to start. But it's a pretty hardcore porn site that involves BDSM. So I've given you a warning. It's intense. And I remember when I met him, I'm like, oh my goodness, I hope you don't expect me to do any of the things the girls do in there, because I can't. That's not my thing, right? Notice my negotiation.
Right.
Anyway.
You have a choice?
Yes, we have. We actually have choice. And anyway, it was his birthday. And so he wanted to give me a spanking. And so it was his birthday and somebody else's birthday. So me and this other submissive, we bent over and we were facing each other, literally holding hands. And I knew he happened to be quite a sadist. So he really enjoyed giving pain. And this can be a complicated thing for people to understand if they haven't experienced it. But some people really enjoy inflicting consensual pain. Okay.
If the person that's receiving it is enjoying it or not.
Well, this is where it's getting nuanced, because I'm into pleasing, right? So that night he spanked me so hard. This was my birthday gift to him, to offer him my submission and my ass to be spanked. And there were points I was not enjoying it. I was clinging onto this other woman's hands, kind of for dear life. But the part of it that worked for me was that I wanted to be pleasing. I was getting off on being pleasing and on being able to offer this service to him, right? So that doesn't have to be everybody's vehicle in, but that it worked for me. Now, I might not say yes to that from everybody, not to the level of intensity, because, you know, I was getting cheerled by this other woman. She's like, you can do it, right? And she was loving what she was experiencing at the same intensity. Like, it worked for her. She's a hardcore masochist. I am not that. So we'll put the websites, Crystal, I'm seeing you asking for the links, but we'll put the websites in afterwards. I think I was referencing kink.com. But that's kind of my workaround. If it's pleasing for somebody, that's the reward for me. That's one of the things I enjoy and makes play satisfying. So yeah. I'm talking, so I want to give you a space.
Yeah, it's been a fun exploration for me over the years of, before I identified as anyone kinky, I mean, just playing, let's say like using like a massage or like nails or whatever, and someone else has, you know, a response, then that would light me up, you know, so then you can, you know, bring in other tools and other fun toys, and you just watch the person having their experience. And so, yeah, that's been really fun for me.
Right.
If you're not enjoying it, then
don't do it if you're not enjoying it, please.
Yeah, exactly.
So Marianne's asking, and I think this is valid again, saying, you know, can't kissing one's heart or licking. I love that. I've never thought of licking somebody's heart, but I love that because that's very essential. Or blowing on the heart or holding the heart or caressing the heart do the same. And I think all of those are beautiful ways to connect and
Yeah.
engage with someone, right? They things I do on a very, I haven't tried the licking on the heart. Thanks for the tip.
I haven't either. That's a great idea.
Doesn't that sound
I
awesome?
noticed that, like, yeah, bringing in all the different sensations. And I mean, I don't know if you've seen a flogger. What was her name? What was Crystal? Did
Oh,
Crystal say that?
Crystal, yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
not going to out Crystal
So
story, even though I
flogger
know.
is a very light, like there's very wide strips of leather. It's very yeah, it's just really light, and so you can kind of drag the fabric kind of like this, you know, across the heart or the back of the heart. And when you kind of thud it against it, it's a different sensation than, say, licking or touching. And so you're going to have to feel in your own body, for you, what kind of sensation is going to allow you to open and maybe experience whatever you want to experience. And it could just be, you know, feeling the tender licks or something else, you know.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of the discovery. You get to feel all this tactile stuff and see what works for you.
Yes. And again, to yes, Crystal, I know we got a little confused who was asking the question. It's okay. I'm still on trying to answer Marianne. So just as we would in neo-tantric play and connection, I really invite people to learn a whole variety of ways of exploring. If kink doesn't work for you, and if you try intense sensation, like I referenced earlier on, the paddle does not work for me. It is non-erotic. It is not fun. I don't like nipple clamps. I breastfed for 4¼ years. I've had as much torture as I ever want to have on my nipples ever. Like, a lot of people love their nipples being tweaked. I'm like, it is non-erotic for me. It is only enduring. And so, yeah, I'm just like, that's not my thing. So it's a similar thing. But what I invite people to do is, if you're curious, to try it out, because I'm going to talk about a more intense experience of pain now. And I'm going to talk about caning. So I grew up in South Africa, and there's a strong British influence, especially in the schooling system. And so, you know, at the boarding schools, like my brother went to a boys' boarding school, they get caned. I mean, you would get caned.
Wow.
I'm not saying this is right. Like, I disagree with corporal punishment, but especially because it's non-consensual when you're a schoolboy, right? Anyway, they would get caned, and this regularly happened in England. So again, I'm not condoning corporal.
Someone that may not know what caning is, it doesn't need to necessarily be an actual cane. It could be a stick or like a bamboo, or like, it can look different, right? Okay.
Right, but it can be made out of rattan. There are lots of, it could be made out of, I don't think they use fiberglass, but they use synthetic cane, I think maybe fiberglass. Anyway, I'm normally on the receiving end. Crystal asked that question. She's like, you a top, a bottom, or a switch? And I'm mostly a submissive, and I sometimes switch. I'll come back to that later. But so I love being caned. I said that on like Facebook Live.
Wow.
Oh my God. I love being caned.
What part of the body is it different on different parts of your body?
Yes. So for example, I have a hard limit, not that this has ever been offered, but like if somebody wanted to cane my face, right, I would be a hard no on that. The area that feels most exquisite to me is normally on the buttocks, on the ass. Right, we're talking about kink, so I can say that. So, and what I love is that, so there's the sound. Remember you talked about sound earlier. So the sound of the swish. Even that gets me all revved up. But then there's this actual sensation when the cane lands on the skin. And you feel the pain, and then for me, it goes away. And there's sort of a pause. And then this beautiful warm sensation radiates out of the area. So from a tantric perspective, we've created some activation. We've actually added, with the caning, energy to the body, right?
Wow, yes.
I think it's Eve Minax, who's a kinky sex educator in San Francisco. She teaches spanking like this. She's like, it's about putting energy into the body. And I love that. I can literally always tell who's been trained by her because they spank really well. Anyway, so with caning, it's like there are all these different layers of the sensation. right?
Mm.
And then for me, and I know we're veering into some edgy territory, but for me, often there'll be, I tend to bruise pretty easily. There'll be bruising afterwards. And again, I've consented to this experience, but hey, I love the reminder every time I sit down of the really hot time that I had with my play partner, like for, depending on the caning, like the next few days or the next week, right?
Yeah.
But also, if anybody else happens to see me naked,
They're
then
like,
then
what's
my
going on?
lover's marks are left on my body. And for me, that is a turn on. So I'm
Yeah.
proud of the marks. And that people may have different relationships to them. I'm really speaking from my perspective today. So
Wonderful. I
yes.
could talk for hours with you, Caroline. Mm.
Yes. So I want to come back to Crystal's question, just because we didn't even talk about how long we were going to do this, but we've been on for an hour, so I know I'm imagining we have to wrap up soon.
Wow. Okay.
Goes so
Yeah,
fast.
it
But
does.
you were asking whether I consider myself a dom, a sub, or a switch. I'm very, very dominant in my everyday life. I love being in charge. I'm a control freak. Like I like being in the driver's seat. I'm one of those triple type A people. But when I'm playing in kink play, and the other thing I have to say, I hold erotic space for people all the time in my sessions. And I love that. That's in my private sessions. But when I'm not working, and I love my work, but like I want a break. I want somebody else to be in control.
Yeah.
Right? I run my whole household myself. Like I'm a single mom. Like there are all these things where I'm in the driver's seat. Like it's like a vacation.
Yep. Yeah.
Right? I'm seeing the resonance in you. So I mostly play as a sub when I play, but I dated somebody for 4 years who didn't submit to very many people, but he was more of a switch. And what I mean by switch is that the dynamic can go back and forth, and that could be, one person is in charge on one day, and then the other person takes control another day, or back and forth in the scene. And
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not really that into being the one in control when I'm exploring kink play, it's easier for me if it goes back and forth because otherwise I
Yeah.
have maps to work. So yes, I switch sometimes, but I'm not particularly good with toys. I really recommend people get trained. If you want to use a flogger, go and learn how to do it so that you don't only keep yourself safe, but you keep the person safe.
Mm-hmm.
And caning, you need to know how to do that so that you don't actually injure someone because,
Yeah.
there is a risk with all these kinds of play and you want to be mindful about the risk and mitigating the risk so that we can play safe, sane, and consensual.
Yeah. I just had an instructor here for Sensual Society, and we did a whole class on impact play. And
Uh-huh.
they brought all the tools, and I was the demo person. So I got to experience caning for the first time because I was like,
Oh,
I don't know about that. And
right.
I picked, I got some choices on where in the body it would be safe. And bottom of the feet was really interesting. It was not sexual at all. But the sensation afterwards, like stung for a second, and then the warm thing that came afterwards, I was like, okay, now I get it. That is yummy. Do it again. So it was like nothing I'd felt before.
Right.
Yeah. It was,
Oh, I love hearing that you because this was just recently, right?
we just recently did that class. I mean, I've been doing my own impact play and exploration, but not that wide scope. Just sit in the class. Here's all the toys that we're going to be going over, and actually watch and feel and experience the demo. That is so important, I feel, because it keeps people, you get a good education before you make some accidents or, possibly injure someone. I wish more of these classes were available, but I think it's so taboo.
One of the things, I have to look really hard to find good things about 50 Shades of Grey, but one of the good things is that I feel like it's brought kink play into the more mainstream conversation.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
true.
Right, so Suburban Housewives are talking about it. I want to reiterate, I think 50 Shades of Grey is abuse, not BDSM. It is non-consensual. But I like that it's in the more mainstream conversation. And there certainly are a lot of classes. You know, a lot of my friends fly around the country teaching. So if you're interested in learning, you could go and look. There's a website called FetLife, FETLIFE.com. And on there, they have listings for your area where there'll be different classes. So that's a great resource. For those of you that are lucky enough to live in the San Francisco Bay Area, this weekend, I think it's on, I'm pretty sure it's Sunday, is the Folsom Street Fair. Woo! So Folsom Street Fair is when the Kinksters come out in there. It's weird. I'm like, I'm not into leather. I was walking and I go and get custom pieces made. I'm like, I don't want leather. And I'm in a gay men's leather store. And they're like, what do you mean you don't want leather? I'm like, no, I'm not into leather. So anyway, but there'll be lots of leather. There'll be lots of ways for you to experience and see. And when I say experience, not only as a voyeur, although that's certainly possible, like I know the Society of Janus, which is I believe they're a charity, but they're an organization that also runs workshops in the Bay Area. And they have a booth where you can just go and try different kinds of play. And they, you know, you donate money to raise money for charity. But they have people that they've vetted that they know actually have some skill. And then you can have, you know, I don't know, a 20-minute experience with somebody, just like you said, to try out some of the things because you didn't know what caning was going to be like. And then, yeah, and then you learned something about caning on the feet. Crystal, I'm going to invite you to go and look at the opening introduction. I think you joined the call a little late. I'm not a pro dom. I have friends that are pro doms. I have dated other professional dominants, but my focus is mostly neo-Tantra. But I'll put this tidbit in because I know the time's gone so fast today. You know, one of the areas, I don't offer kink sessions like in my private sessions really, but in one of the areas where I do use power exchange in a very empowering way for myself. And I'm feeling a little nervous talking about this actually, because I'm kind of giving I'm giving away a lot of secrets in this video. Anyway, yeah, no. But so, you know, before all of my sessions, we discuss boundaries. I learned great communication skills from negotiating in the kink scene. So in my sessions, we talk about the boundaries ahead of time, theirs and mine. And then if for some reason I feel like they are not surrendering to the experience I'm inviting them into, and this is a neo-tantric experience, I might put my hand on their chest and they're lying on the bed and like pretty dominantly put my hand on their heart chakra and just let them know through that subtle energy play who's in charge. So that's one way that I weave it in. There are some other ways, but that's not really the point of the call. Crystal, I've studied with a number of people. I've referenced many of them on this call, on this video. So I invite you to go to the beginning to see some of the people. Like I've studied with Midori, I've studied with Margot, yes, with Margot Anand, but with Barbara Corellis, who wrote a wonderful book that's very LGBTQ inclusive and friendly.
Nice. Also, 50 Shades of Grey is mild compared to what is on, the kink side is just hardcore, but it's all consensual. We're talking about the dynamics that 50 Shades of Grey actually is trying to show you how it works in the real world, and it doesn't work that way. The kink website is definitely more explicit at what they're doing, but it's not a movie that's trying to pretend that that's how you do a DS relationship. Would you say?
Absolutely. And I did preface it before I even referenced it on this video saying this is for people that really want to look at something hardcore, because if we just I wanted to offer a range because there's a whole range of experience.
It's a flavor. Yeah.
Exactly.
You know,
It's not for
I
everybody.
was really interested in showing the range because like I had clients that would go to kink.com, for example, and then I had clients that would come to Sensuous Society and there's like the full range. And I thought, where are the good videos that just show, you know, the range? So it's not just all hardcore. I
Mhm.
thought that would be a nice little niche,
Yeah,
personally.
I think, and I hope I'm saying this right. Please feel free to check. But I think there's something called Kink Academy, and I'm forgetting who the organizers are, but where they are actually teaching online classes.
Was
I'm
it
a big
simple? Was it still hardcore? I thought it
no, no, no,
was, but I
no.
might
It's
be.
much more simplified, and
Oh,
yeah. Um, and the two naughty boys, as far as I know, also have. There's a super gentle, super accessible. They teach rope bondage. Um, yeah, and then there are conferences you can go to learn. So they've really, I obviously am in a very privileged position living in the Bay Area, but there are
yeah.
conferences happening all over. Um, but I do actually recommend that people try and attend in person. I'm a big believer that you actually, just like at a yoga class, right? You can use a yoga video, and I'm talking about hatha yoga or asana. You can use a video or a book as a support to your personal practice, but you really need a teacher there giving you corrections and adjustments. So
Hmm.
I'm a big believer in actually going to learn hands-on, so that if you're making mistakes or doing something wrong, you have somebody that can give you uh, feedback. You know, Marianne, I actually don't know about an authority that you can report to if something goes wrong or is hurt by play. I mean, I don't really want to end here, but I do want to say I had a friend that was in a consensual um, uh, dominant submissive dynamic with her boyfriend. And one night, outside of that dynamic, he assaulted her. And she did go to the police and she did file a report. So, you know, these cases can be a little complicated, but they actually get pretty well documented in the community. And I strongly recommend that you get references on people, that you look them up, that you Google them. And if anybody on this call knows of an authority, I'm certainly happy to for that information to be shared. But the community itself, actually, I mean, people all talk quite a lot, actually. So I know, at least on FetLife, on that, it's a kinky social networking site. People do actually talk pretty publicly if there's been a consent violation or if somebody is unsafe.
Yeah, I might have some resources I'll post below. I'll post in the
Great,
comments. Okay.
great.
Awesome, Caroline. Is there anything else that you want to share? I feel like
Oh,
we could continue talking.
I know. I'm like, we could keep going, but yeah, I know this is a long video for most people, and yeah, I have things I need to get to in my day as well. We can always arrange another time to talk
That'd be
about it. But
awesome.
as I said, I'm really a big believer in people having experiences and also setting themselves up for success and safety. So, you know, we've talked a little bit about how um, BDSM or kink play can be meditation. We've talked about how it can be devotional. When I lead my black diamond pujas, for example, I'm weaving in mantras. So we're weaving in like these energetic keys in Sanskrit, and we're weaving in these mantras to invoke different qualities of the divine lovers, even as we're engaging.
Nice.
Anyway, it's totally awesome. You should all come and experience it. So these classes honestly sell out faster than I can put them on the schedule. But I am going to look at what's my next one. I know I have space for people that I identify as ladies only, and a lady is whatever that means to you. So my next Black Diamond ritual is happening November 27th in Oakland. I'll put the links in the comments below for you. And then
Awesome.
January 7th, I have tickets for people of all genders. Because yes, there are more than two genders. That's a topic for another conversation. But January 7th is the next one, and there's still a few discounted tickets available. But people have already started signing up. So please do come and learn with me. And I know that part of what prompted us to pick this as the topic was there's been a lot of discussion online recently about how BDSM and neo-Tantra can't go together. And I mentioned this the last time I held this ritual, and people looked at me like totally confused. They were like, what do you mean? Of course it goes together.
You mean after they had experienced it, right?
Right. So come and have an experience. And yeah, if I'm not teaching in Oakland, I reference a number of other teachers that actually travel even more prolifically. Midori teaches in New York. She teaches all over the country. She is, wow, I think she has like her platinum status with United. She travels so much. And the two Naughty Boys also travel. Barbara Carellis is in New York. And yes, if you get a group together, we probably have to do more than just my Black Diamond ritual. But if you've got a group together of 20 people and you want to hire me privately, I'm a yes to coming to you. So feel free to send me a personal message about that afterwards. I do want to address this question. Sorry, because I want to make sure Crystal has heard. So Crystal is saying, and I think, Crystal, you're referencing something I said earlier. So your question is, if she, and I think you're referencing my friend, was assaulted in the dynamic during BDSM, would she be heard? You know, I'm going to have to paint a scenario because this was outside of the dynamic for my friend. But yes, if somebody came to me and told me that they were injured and that they were hurt in the context of any kind of interaction, be it vanilla sex or neo-tantric sex or kink or anything, right? At a college fraternity party, right? And somebody said initially they agreed to a dynamic and then they no longer consented and they said no and their voice was not heard and their truth was not honored. I would absolutely first believe the victim, and then we would have to go into a more in-depth investigation. But absolutely, you get to choose, and I say this in all my classes, only to accept what I'm inviting you to do from the front of the room. If you're an authentic yes, if you're a maybe, default to a no, and you can always come back another time and see where you're at that night. You are welcome to change your mind at any time.
Yeah.
Toddlers are really good at this, aren't they? Yeah, toddlers and teenagers. But I think it can actually be an empowering thing to play with. And I do that sometimes in my private sessions. If I work a lot with trauma survivors. So if I'm working with somebody who has experienced a lot of boundary violations and consent violations, I ask, let me know if and when you're ready for me to touch your body. I don't even touch them before they ask. That's informed by Betty Martin's work, The Wheel of Consent.
Which is deep. I mean, to give someone the space to make that choice and then they decide, even if it's a hand on the heart, there's something that happens somatically that they're able to heal and recognize, wow, this person is actually really taking care of me and following my requests.
Absolutely. And I tell my my trauma survivors, you don't have to be polite when you tell me no. If your no comes, it can be verbal, it can be nonverbal. You can shove my hand off you. You can say no impolitely, or it doesn't have to come out in a pretty way. I'm your practice partner, because some of them have never got to say no before. So yeah, I think people totally have a right to change their mind. That can happen on a date. That can happen on a call with a friend. I have some amazing friends who are pretty good communicators, and they'll often say to me, you know, I'm just noticing I'm feeling complete without call. Is there anything else you need to do? I can write abandonment issues, so I might need another 5 minutes before we let go. But you know, we can always change our minds. That's for people of all genders. We get to be in consent. Consent and active consent is an ongoing process. It's not a once-off. unless you've negotiated that specifically.
Yeah.
Otherwise.
Wonderful.
Great. Well, we've gone way over, Melissa, but I'm grateful.
I thought we were going to be like 30 minutes. This is hilarious. Okay, so, Caroline, you are wonderful. I'm so glad we had this conversation. I feel like there's so many threads in the future that I want to follow up with you. And then there's a couple things in the threads that I'll go back and fill in the details. And yeah, is there anything you'd like to share in closing?
I'm a big believer in people making informed choices with as much information at their disposal as they can. So if you think anybody else would benefit from this video, please feel free to share it, because I think the more knowledge we have, knowledge is power, and then we can make healthy and informed decisions about what is or isn't right for us. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I appreciate the questions. I appreciate sharing some hot moments with you.
Yeah.
and hopefully planting some seeds for some of you. And I look forward to seeing you in one of in one of my classes, so we can sample some of these modalities in real time.
Wonderful.
Soon.
And people can find you where? Where's your website?
Thank you. My website is Caroline, that's Caroline, Caroline Carrington. We'll put this all in the text, but carolinecarrington.com. I'm all over Facebook. So that's a great way to reach out to me. Wonderful. And how did they find you, Melissa?
You can find me at sexlovesoul.com, and you can find out more about the somatic work that I do.
I love that. Awesome. Sex, love, soul.
Well, it was like sex, love, and rocking the soul. So that's how that was.
That's beautiful. I like that a lot. I'm into words.
You.
So one other piece, just because there has been, sorry, I keep saying we'll end and then we keep going, but a couple of people have talked about like abuse and trauma, and I take those very seriously. I mentioned that at the beginning of the call. And this Saturday, I'm actually hosting a trauma expert. She's been in the field for 20 years. Her name is Christine Donahue. She's a somatic experiencing practitioner and teaches at the Barbara Brennan School, which is an energy school. So she understands all the woo and all the energetic stuff, and she can really speak to the physiology of trauma. And we're going to learn skills and tools. Firstly, how to identify trauma, and some tools on what to do when somebody's in a trauma response. I'm going to be a student in this class for the second time. That good. And I think we have like 6 tickets left. So if you're in the Bay, it's not going to be live streamed, but if you're in the Bay, please come and join us. And it's also, we have a couple of survivors that are coming as well. So you're going to learn very practical tools from somatic experiencing to help somebody out of a trauma response. And most importantly, to learn when you have to refer out. I have a number of therapists I work with when people are coming for Tantra and they're disassociating so much, or they're having active PTSD. I work in conjunction with therapists that have more skill than even I do with trauma to make sure.
Great. That's so beautiful. All right, Caroline, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for all your wonderful questions. And I look forward to more in person soon.
Okay, sounds good. All right, bye everyone.
All right, bye. Bye.